Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. Good to see everybody. Alhamdulillah, we're blessed to be with you all. Thank you all for joining us. We're blessed to be with Ahl al our ulama, our teachers. We're blessed to be with people young and old. We're blessed to be with people from a variety of backgrounds. So welcome again, and we hope that today's conversation will be fruitful, bi'idhnillah. Before we jump in to our conversation, I just wanted to take a moment to start with a pause, to remember our Muslim brothers and sisters across the world who are suffering, who are under bombardment, from our Muslim brothers and sisters here, even in the United States, who are being held as political prisoners, whether here or the UK or elsewhere in the quote-unquote enlightened West. Let us pray for their patience, for God's mercy to unfold upon them, and for their victory. Let us begin with the communal recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen ar-Rahman ar-Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. We come together as Muslims today, Muslims of various ethnic and intellectual and spiritual backgrounds, Muslims from different streams of thoughts and streams of tradition, Muslims with varied and different histories, but all Muslim. Today, we do not, as some people mistakenly understood, we do not come together to debate or engage in polemics. We come together with open hearts to seek to know one another, to understand each other. More than that, we come together to realize, rediscover, and reaffirm our shared belief in God, our shared love for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and our shared vision to live a collective social life in devotion to God, in devotion to the truth, and seeking justice. We hope at the end of our conversation, we have seen and affirmed or reaffirmed the Muslimness of the other, whatever the other is from your vantage point, and we have a sense of protectiveness and loyalty to one another. That is the dissolution of the otherness that we may have entered with, that we have built the beginnings of a foundation to work together, to live together, and indeed to love one another. That we have built a communal vision in line with the Quranic dictates, وَاتَّسِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ فَأَصْبَحْتُمْ بِنِعْمَتِهِ إِخْوَانًا. Hold fast all together, God says, to the rope of God, and do not be divided. And remember God's blessing upon you when you were enemies. Then he brought your hearts together. So with God's blessing, you became brothers. This verse speaks to the social, not just the individual, but the social commitment to the whole Muslim community to hold fast to the Quran and the Sunnah of our beloved Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as its guiding principle, and to avoid creating a society of disunited hearts. For a society that is, or a community that is disunified, that does not have unity, is a community of weakness, whereas unity develops strength and power. In our seeking of this strengthened ummah, we have two distinguished speakers and scholars with us. I'd like to just briefly introduce each of them before diving into our conversation. Ustadh Ubaydallah Evans, those of you who are in Chicago know him well, and indeed across the nation. I think every day I see a new flyer with, mashallah, with your smiling face on it. He converted to Islam while in high school. Upon conversion, Ustadh Ubaydallah began studying some of the foundational books of Islam under the private tutelage of local scholars. Since then, he has studied at Chicagoland Islamic, the IIE out in Elgin. He studied in Tarim in Yemen and the Al Azhar University in Cairo. He was the first African American to graduate from its Sharia program. Ustadh Ubaydallah instructs at Ta'leef, many of you know, our neighbors and brothers down the road, and at Iman, Inner City Muslim Action Network, down the street to the south. He is also the scholar in residence at Alim. It's based in Philly, if I'm not mistaken.
Detroit.
Oh, Detroit. Afwan. I associated with Philly.
Even worse.
Where he teaches, and he's a bright light in our community here in Chicago, and indeed the United States in general. Sayyid Hadi Rizvi grew up in London, which you will hear in just a moment, where he began his seminary studies while at the Hausa of England in 2007. In 2009, he transferred to Qom, Iran, where he spent studying in various institutions until 2017. While in Qom, he completed his bachelor's degree in jurisprudence and Islamic studies and audited the intermediate or sutuh level studies. Amongst some of his advanced level extracurricular studies were in hadith studies, legal maxims, Islamic political theory, and other topics. In his final year in Qom, he attended the advanced level classes in jurisprudence, epistemology, and Afwan, legal theory and Rijal. Sayyid Hadi has recently moved to Dallas, Texas. He lives with his family, and he is an independent researcher in Islamic studies and helps lead communities. We're blessed to have both of them with us. Let us welcome them with a warm salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now let us take a deep breath as we begin, just to loosen our shoulders and maybe begin with a smile. Any kind of negativity has left our body. We're going to begin with a conversation or a set of questions. We could start at many different points of departure. We could start with the shared heritage of the Quran, the shared heritage of the Prophet, with the shared heritage of this, that, or the other. But we have decided to begin a discussion on the shared heritage of the family of the Prophet, the Ahl al Bayt, alayhim salam, jami'a. As many of you know, a hallmark of Shi'i Islam is this devotion to and love and respect to the family of the Prophet, but what I hope we see is that that is a shared heritage. I had an initial question for Ustadh Ubaydallah, but he requested that we start with Sayyid Hadi. So I'm going to begin the question in reverse. Sayyid Hadi, can you speak to the link and relationship between the Ahl al Bayt and the Prophet of Islam in the Shi'i tradition? Perhaps starting with the narration that we have on the board here, Hussein is from me and I am from Hussein. And perhaps you may also elaborate on the ways that the Imams of Ahl al Bayt from the Shi'i tradition also engaged with, quote unquote, the other.
I wasn't made aware of these negotiations of who starts first. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa bihi nasta'een, wa huwa khayrun nasir wal mu'een, wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen, wa ala ahli baytihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you all for coming. Before I begin, I do genuinely want to thank you all for coming sincerely. Your presence here is a sign that you are committed to this ideal of a unified or approximated ummah of the brotherhood and sisterhood that our Prophet would have desired for this ummah. By coming here, you're taking that step and committing to that ideal. And inshallah, we hope that we can take further steps and open the path to make that more common and to make that a norm, inshallah, for us here in the West, and hopefully to inspire others to do the same. I would much rather my colleagues, teachers, and mentors, others be here. I, in fact, spoke to Sheikh Trent to have others, but because I've been given the baton, please forgive me. You have to bear with me. I'm grateful to Sheikh Ubaydallah Evans, whose content I followed for a few years now, and I was very excited to have the opportunity just to see him. I actually partly agreed to this because I wanted to see Sheikh Ubaydallah, and I thought it would be great to have him here in person. On the question, Hussein, it's from me, and I am from Hussein. This hadith is found in the sources of the Fariqain in the schools. It's found in, I believe, Tirmidhi, and it's recorded, of course, in the Shia books. It says, Hussein is from me, and I am from Hussein. And Allah loves whomever loves Hussein. What does that mean to us? The Holy Prophet knows that eventually he's going to depart from this ummah. He knows that he will no longer be around. And he leaves us clues and signs as to what to do after him, as where to go after him. Now, what did he want us to take from Hussein? Those are things that we may have different interpretations on. But what we can all agree upon is that Hussein was a figure that the Prophet introduced to us, not just in this narration, but in other narrations. But how did the Prophet introduce Imam Hussein in this narration? He said that he is from me, and I am from Hussein. That first part, everyone understands. Imam Hussein is the grandson of the Holy Prophet. It makes sense. He's literally biologically from the Prophet through his daughter, Lady Fatima sallallahu alayha. But how is the Prophet from Hussein? And the way this has been understood through the Shia tradition is that Imam Hussein acts as a protector and preserver of the prophetic tradition. What is that prophetic tradition? What is that prophetic ideal and values? That is a Muslim one. That is one that keeps Muslims tied to Tawheed. And so for us, the role of the Ahl al Bayt primarily, now we consider them imams. We consider them to be heads of a theological school. They have theological ideas which may be different to the ideas of other first generation leaders of the Muslimin and companions. They have legal opinions different to other jurists. That's there, that exists. But beyond that, they also are figures who are leaders of the Muslimin. They're people that have the concerns of the Muslims in mind. Now, I think for us as Shias, and I'll speak to the Shia audience, that when we think of Imam Hussein, the first idea that we get in our mind is that he is the third Imam of the Shias. I want us to take a pause. I want us, before we come to the idea that Imam Hussein is an Imam of the Shias, the third Imam, I want us to think of him as an individual who was invested in preserving the prophetic legacy, that he was a Muslim, that his first and foremost loyalty was that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His first and foremost concern was Tawheed, was the prophethood of the Prophet, was the Quran, the Sunnah, and inshallah as we go on, we'll talk about some of these statements in which he highlights that. And once he was faced with individuals who had that belief in Allah and believed in the Quran and the Holy Prophet, he could speak to them about other issues. But first and foremostly, his concerns were these, and these are mutual concerns. Imam Hussein existed at a time and lived at a time where the sects had not developed yet. There was no Shi'a in the sense that we understand today. There was no Sunni. They were all Muslims. So when Imam Hussein was calling onto the people, when he gave his speeches, he was speaking to everyone. He did not bring a group exclusively and speak to them. If you look at the speeches on the way and as he goes to Karbala and even in Karbala on Ashura, those speeches are addressed to Muslims. Those speeches that he's speaking to those who are actually coming to war with him, they're still about the same topics. They're still about Tawheed. They're still called back to the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet. So before calling to even his own leadership, even his own right to leadership, the core message was a return back to the Sunnah. And I think that is something, that part of Imam Hussein is something that we can all appreciate and benefit from. There's many narrations in the books of all Muslims regarding the virtues of Imam Hussein. I don't need to repeat them for you. Sheikh Ubaydallah can probably do a better job than me of speaking to the virtues of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. But I want us to think of Imam Hussein as a figure who first and foremost thought about the Ummah, who wanted to serve the Ummah. This is not to negate anything of our views of imamat, our views of our fiqh. But these are not the places, this is not the reason that Imam Hussein came out. Imam Hussein could have had his group of followers. He could have taken them and been with them. But he decided that he was going to stay put. He was going to stay a part of the Ummah, and he was going to contribute to this Ummah. And he, to his last breath, would try and remind everyone of the importance of bringing back and reviving that sunnah of the Holy Prophet. So for me, Imam Hussein is an ummatic actor, and we'll talk about this word, what the ummatic actor means. He's a civilizational thinker. Because before all of these things, before thinking of, and for us, imamat is not an individual benefit. For us, imamat is the extension of the, it's a function of protecting the prophetic message. So it's not personal benefit. So if he calls onto his imamat, we don't see it as him calling onto Shi'ism. We see it as him calling, again, even through his own imamat, back to the seerah of the Holy Prophet. So yeah, this hadith, many other hadith, remind us of the central role because of Imam Hussein's ability to hold on to that message, his sincerity in holding on to that. And I think that's something we all accept, we all revere him for, and inshallah we'll continue to do so. I don't think that's specific to any one sect. And sometimes we may need to be reminded, sometimes we might do a bad job of introducing Imam Hussein, and we might make him a sectarian figure. We might make people feel that they need to come and accept my theology and my legal school before they can love Imam Hussein properly. Or I will judge their love for Imam Hussein unless and except they embrace him as I embrace him, in all of the ways that I embrace him, with the details that I embrace him. We can do a better job of first reminding ourselves of Imam Hussein as a central figure of the Ummah who had the concerns of the Ummah. And that's something that we can all love and appreciate him for. Sorry for taking all that time. Inshallah.
Barakallah feek.
أحسن.
So
قويمة.
to add some more color to the canvas, especially speaking from a Shi'i vantage point, many of us see what we want to see. You know, there's a psychological notion that like when you're expecting to see a particular word, even if the word is not in front of you, but you're told that you're about to read XYZ, you look at the words and that's what you see. Even though the words are not, it's not read, it's read, but you read read. Ustadh and I had coffee a couple of years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, and he gifted me this beautiful ring. And I remember he took it off of his finger and he handed it to me. And he said, well, what does it say on it? And I looked at it and it was like my mind couldn't compute. First of all, it's a little small and it's calligraphy, so that's one issue. But I was expecting one thing. I was expecting maybe a verse of the Quran. But it has the names of the Ahl al Bayt on the ring. And I think from a Shi'i vantage point, I'm expressing a naqsa, a deficiency in my own self. The Shi'i community often doesn't appreciate that the Sunni community has a love, respect, and reverence for the Ahl al Bayt. I wasn't expecting that on the ring that you had gifted me. So, Ustadh, can you speak to that shared heritage from a Sunni vantage point? What is the role and the picture of the Ahl al Bayt?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله ثم أما بعد السلام عليكم. I think it goes without saying that it's a great honor and a tremendous privilege to be a part of such a blessed assembly. I want to thank The many hands, I'm sure, worked and toiled indefatigably to give us this opportunity to be enriched, not only from the conversation taking place here, but perhaps more enriching the bonds of fraternity, the bonds of sorority that are taking place there. I want to thank my dear brother Sheikh Trent, should I say Trenton Carl, for affording me this opportunity, Sheikh Hadi for reaching out to me. And my presence here has really been healing. I feel myself humbled. You know, it's not very often that I feel underdressed. Yeah, it's not very often that that happens to me, but it's happening now. And just, you know, I was texting my wife just a minute ago, and I was saying, it's actually really good to be in a space that is shared among our communities, and to not be in a space where everything is flowing according to your norms, right? To be forced to embrace, to appreciate another vantage point, right? I think this is really healing. You know, when I was at Azhar, we had oral exams. And I would always go to my oral exam in a jacket and a tie. I know you guys don't wear ties. No, I'm just kidding. And, you know, I was in the Maliki Firqa. So most of the students were West African. And we had a very difficult exam in fiqh. But when I sat down, I think because of the clear Westernness of my dress, my teacher said to me, my proctor, "Where are you from?" I said, "America." He said, "American Muslim, a Muslim American." He then said, "هل أنت تحب Obama?" Do you love Obama? Right? He said, "Do you love Obama?" I said, طبعا. At this time, Obama had just been elected. And I said, طبعا كلنا نحب Obama. We all love Obama. He said, خلاص نجحت. He said, "You passed." Right? I looked over my shoulder and I saw the African students, and they were looking at me like, man, he's asking us like about torts and contracts. He asked you if you like Obama. And then I said to myself, this is what it feels like to be white in America. No, to enjoy this kind of unearned privilege. This is like, oh, wait, right? And so I just texted my wife, "Oh my God, I'm a Muslim white person." You know, I'm accustomed to being the numerical majority. I'm accustomed to everything flowing according to my norms. And now I'm in a space where I have to appreciate difference, and it's healing. And so I appreciate that. On the question of love for the family of the Prophet ﷺ, if I can be honest with you, this was something that was initially a challenge for me. When I first embraced Islam, love of Ahl al Bayt almost offended this deeply egalitarian ethic to which I was committed. You know, I thought it sounded to me, now mind you, I was 16 years old when I embraced Islam. It sounded like another biodeterministic superiority. And I, as an African American, I was trying to get away from that. So I remember one of my teachers in Yemen talking to me about love of Ahl al Bayt. And he could tell from my face that I really wasn't into it. Love of Ahl al Bayt. He said, "This issue of loving the family of the Prophet ﷺ, this is a challenge for you." I said, "Yes, it's a challenge for me." He said, "Think about it this way." He said, "You might have a physicist from, where are you from?" I said, "Illinois," from Illinois State University. "And you might have a physicist from MIT. Now, the physicist from Illinois State will be judged on the basis of his work, and the physicist from MIT will be judged on the basis of his work. But you have to admit the physicist from MIT has a nisba fa'iqa. His association is superior, right? Those people that have a nisba, their association is to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We acknowledge the superiority of that nisba over all other ansab. And that resonated with me. That made sense to me. Then he said to me, who is your best friend? And my best friend actually lives here in Chicago. His name is Shamar Hemphill. I mean, he used to work for Imam. You know, we've been friends since we were, mashallah, we've been friends since we were 11, right? Right, and that was just a couple years ago. And he said, if something happened to your best friend, what would you feel that you owed his progeny, his offspring, in his absence? You would serve them, you would visit them, you would pray for them, right? These are the people that are the progeny of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if you think about feeling indebted to them, if you think about feeling beholden to them, if you think about esteeming their role historically, it's actually quite natural. It's a natural extension of your love for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just as your love for your best friend's children or grandchildren or family would be a natural extension of your love for him. It's a natural extension. So when you feel uneasy about loving the Prophet alayhi wasallam, this is actually nothing, there's nothing controversial about this. There's nothing that should make you uneasy about this. This is part and parcel of loving the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I think that, for Sunni Muslims, love of Ahl al Bayt is a cardinal aspect of our faith and our theology. And none of my teachers at any point in my training ever discouraged the love of the Prophet ﷺ or the love of the family of the Prophet ﷺ. So the story of this ring, mashallah, you honor me today in wearing this ring. A friend of mine gave it to me. He said, I want you to have this. And when I inspected the ring, I could see that it had the names of Ahl al Bayt. So I thought, and I used to wear the ring. I mean, I have lots of nice jewelry, I used to wear the ring. But when Sheikh Trent asked to meet with me, I thought this would be very, very meaningful to him. And I know that this is a Muslim that would cherish this ring. And this is why I gifted it to him.
So we've set a peg, a framework here for kind of our shared positionality. We had our conversation before with all three of us. We touched on this term ummatic, right? And so I'd like to ask you both to briefly speak about what an ummatic view of community means to each of you. Perhaps you can describe or define the term as you understand it and offer some content for us to understand what an ummatic view produces spiritually and materially. Either one of you can begin.
No, تفضل والله أنا ملح على طلب يعني تفضل.
I personally think Sheikh definitely is dressed better. This is like a lazy, I don't have to think too much about it. Just make sure it doesn't clash, mashallah. On the point of ummatic, for me, just as I described, what does ummatic mean? Someone that centers and prioritizes the benefits of the ummah, the wellness of the ummah beyond all other things. So for us, we see many instances where we believe that the Ahl al Bayt, for example, were wronged, right? Whatever those details are, we still believe that despite how they were treated, intentionally, unintentionally, all those things, we have a theology around that. We look onto their actions and we see that they did not act in revenge, in spite. They did not take that which happened to them and turned it around as an excuse to justify actions which would then harm those who may have become an oxygen. Some of the harm wasn't necessarily malicious. Some of it, whatever it was, they didn't, even when they came in and they had the caliphate and people gave them the allegiance. They did not use that allegiance to take actions that would harm the fabric of the ummah. And in the spaces where they stood and their stances seemed contentious to some, essentially the reason behind that was because the matter that they were bringing up itself was essential to the betterment of the ummah, to the salvation of the ummah. So for me, an ummatic actor is one that prioritizes that. How does that look like for, what does that look like for me if I'm acting? That when I am in a position, when I have the mic in my hand, am I going to use that to further strengthen the ummah, to make the ummah look good? Or am I going to use that to score points for my own side? There'll be times where I'm speaking to my own side, if we want to use those terms. I'll be speaking to my people who share the theology and legal school that I do, and I'll speak in a particular manner. But where there's an opportunity for me to represent the ummah, am I going to do that with the intention to be representative of every single member of that ummah or not? And I think that is the ummatic view. And that's what I see in the Ahl al Bayt, in all of them. And when I say this, I want it to be clear as Shi'as, we don't believe this is an exclusive trait of the Ahl al Bayt, alayhimus salam. We believe that the other companions, there are other companions that shared this fervor to protect the sunnah of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But we believe that the Ahl al Bayt are the easiest individuals for us to all look onto because of the abundance of narrations that we have in both books, and for them to be a starting point, for them to be that shared role model that we can take and inshallah build those bridges and increase that healing, as Sheikh beautifully spoke about.
You know, when I'm thinking about kind of an ummatic view of community, I think it requires a certain intellectual boldness on behalf of our community. I mean, we have quite a voluminous tradition. We have quite a robust tradition. And I think that it requires courage to read that tradition as dialectical. Our tradition is a tradition of conversation. People are in conversation with each other. They're also in conversation with their environs. And so if we are going to be in conversation with our environment, we know that a sectarian partisanship does not serve our shared interest. Even if there is justification for that partisanship in certain books that we've studied, in certain books that we've read, we have to have the boldness to choose, okay, we're not prioritizing those voices. We want to prioritize those ummatic voices within the tradition. So yes, are there anti-Shi'i polemics in Sunni tradition? Of course there are. You'll see that. Those things exist. Being intentional about that, we're not prioritizing those voices. We want to amplify those ummatic voices, those voices that make unity a central and core aspect of our dealing with each other. We're intentionally choosing to do that. And we should be very open about that. This is a choice that we're making. We're choosing. So when you invited me here this afternoon, for me, I was excited because this is what I feel the American Muslim community, this is the contribution I think we can make. We can model what a working unity that does not, our unity is not contingent upon our uniformity. We don't have to be relativist. You can be a Muslim with a strong constitution, theologically, legally, politically, and so can I. But what unites us is greater than what we differ concerning. And so an ummatic view, my direct mentor is Dr. Sherman Jackson, and he's very suspicious of altruism. in our communal dealings. He says, we won't have unity until we have a mission. And within that mission, I recognize that I need you for the fulfillment of my mission. So I cannot mistreat you. I cannot disregard you. I cannot disrespect you, not for your sake, but for my own. See, that's an ummatic view. I have a sense of mission that I can't fulfill without your participation. So I can't afford to alienate you. I can't afford to disregard you. I can't afford to disrespect you because I need you. And when we have that shared sense of mission and that mutual recognition of that mission, then I think our approaches and our views become ummatic in that way.
So with that in mind, you basically covered 3 or 4 questions that I wanted to get to. One of the things that we spoke about was that in order for that mission orientatedness to take hold, to take root, there are certain ethical characteristics that must be in place in each actor. So for instance, speaking from a Shi'i vantage point, sometimes a Shia will be in a Sunni space, and because it doesn't feel sound the way they are used to, because the historical references aren't familiar, they may see within that as like a slight, like almost like an underhanded attack. And then vice versa. I mean, just speaking openly, in my MSA days, as like the only Shia, I was the white Muslim in the room, the only Shia amongst the pool of Sunni friends. If you mention Ali one too many times, like, why are you always talking about Ali? They see in that almost a slight, like there's an agenda, right? What sort of ethical principles are required as prerequisites for each community to help water the seed of an ummatic community?
You know that I have a similar story. When I was at university, I would always quote Imam Ali, but I would say the Sahabi Abu al-Hasan would say this, and I did this for a year. And then the Sunni friend, he came up to me, he's like, who is this Abu al-Hasan? He's like, no one else speaks about him. I've never. And I said, it's Ali ibn Abi Talib. And he said, why didn't you just say that we want to? I said, would you have listened to me? But I also mentioned that the point that we have in our narrations that, take the beauties of our words to people, the mahasin of our kalam to the people, and they will accept those. And so for me, in my mind, there's the historical Ali that I want you to love. I love him, and I know you do have love for him. But for you, that may be mixed with a theological Ali. And that might then make it difficult for you to benefit from many of the things that Ali has said. So if I can remove some of that barrier and still get you the benefit, because essentially neither Al-Hussein and neither Ali were inviting to themselves, nor was the Prophet. What were they inviting to? They were inviting for us to take in those changes, to make those changes, so that ultimately we would open the path, and the path would be open for us to internalize and understand and appreciate that oneness of Allah, the unicity of Allah. What are the ethical requirements? I think what comes to my mind, and please, I mean, there's so much knowledge in the room on both sides. So I hope this discussion continues. But for me, it's that recognizing the Muslimness, like truly, as Sheikh was mentioning, as Yusuf mentioned, that understand that person that is with you, that is standing next to you, that's praying next to you, before all things, there's a list of things that you have completely aligned on. Before you are even standing in that mosque, you've believed in the same God. You've believed in the same book. You've believed that there's a prayer. You've believed that the masajid have a honor and dignity. We all believe that you can't go and do anything you want in the masajid. We have all of these things that we've accepted that allow us to be in the same space. Right? And understanding that and appreciating that, and that making that like the modus operandi that will function as person. And again, like the Sheikh said, we don't need to forego any of what we have, but then not looking at other Muslims as malicious actors. Like seeing the Muslimness. So what does seeing the Muslimness mean? That you also believe that they act in good faith, that you assume the best of them, right? That you excuse them. The same things that you would apply to someone of your own sect, you apply there as well. And we see this in the narrations of the Ahl al Bayt, salam. We have numerous narrations from Imam Sadiq and Imam al-Baqir. He says that when the word they use is a reference to non-Shi'a. It says, go to the masajid and pray with them. In fact, some of the reports say pray in the first lines. You think that Imam saying, go pray in them, like, just stay in the back. No, he's saying go pray, be in the first lines. It says visit the sick, attend the funerals. This is the humanizing vision I believe we need. This is the ummatic vision that I think we require. That praying at your home, me as a Shia, I have to recognize that me praying in my home is not better than me going to the local Sunni masjid and praying there. I should prioritize that. In fact, there's instructions from the Imams to do that. So for me, those looking at that, like really being able to see and see, there is no difference in the Muslimness of me and Sheikh Ubayd except that he's better Muslim than me. But there's no difference. Right now, particularly specifically in our time, we've studied, as Sheikh said, we study books, we studied a particular history, we had a particular training, and we're trying to be as loyal to our training as possible. But that's the shit, we're both trying to be as loyal to our training as possible for the exact same reason. Because we both want loyalty to the Prophet and loyalty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have the exact same intention. We might have that further towards our own tradition, but we're here for the exact same reason, even while we sit here. Right? And I think that is kind of the ethical mindset that we need to go forward with, that remove the othering. Recognize, see the differences, but that's not an other.
Bismillah. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Whenever this question is posed, I'm reminded of this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that occurs in the collection of Imam Muslim, which is a Sunni compilation of hadith. And it's mentioned that a man min Ahl al Bayt, a Bedouin man from the outlying area, he came into the masjid and then he withdrew to a corner and he urinated in the masjid. The Sahaba, radiyallahu anhum jami'an, thought that he was intentionally trying to desecrate the sacred space, and some of them were about to attack him. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, no, leave him. And after the man finished, he said, Ma hamala bika an tabula fil masjid. What would cause you to urinate in the masjid? And the man said that I didn't know that it was inappropriate to urinate in a masjid. And then the Prophet ﷺ called for sijlum min al-ma', a pail of water. And he started to clean that man's urine with his own blessed hand. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Whenever I'm talking with Christian colleagues and they talk about Christ cleaning the disciples' feet, I say the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ cleaned his companion's urine. He started cleaning that man's urine with his own hand. When the man saw this prophetic magnanimity, he said, oh God, have mercy on me and have mercy on Muhammad alayhi wasallam. But then he looked at the Sahaba who still had angry faces because they didn't know what was happening in the conversation. And he said, but don't have mercy on anybody else. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, لَقَدْ حَجَّرَتَ شَيْئًا وَاسِعًا. Truly you have made a vast thing the mercy of God constricted. And every person involved in some self-serving, other obliterating ideology is doing the same thing, making the mercy of God restricted to them and the people of their firqa, them and the people of their movement, them and the people of their creed, them. No, actually, I think that you can hold your position and hold it confidently. But acknowledging that other positions exist actually protects you against becoming chauvinistic in your belief. And I think it might be the last stage of moral maturity that I hold my position and I believe that I'm right. And this is how I want to meet God. But there are other positions. And as I forget which poet said this, but he must have been from Chicago. He said, "It is better to appreciate the change in seasons than to fall hopelessly in love with summer." There will always be difference. We actually have a verse in the Quran that talks about ta'aruf. لِتَعَارُفُوا إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. What I find almost insulting, do you know how many, I'm among family and friends here, right? You know how many interfaith dinners I've attended where people recite this ayah and say, we need ta'aruf with Christians. We need ta'aruf with Jews. And then at the end, we all take a picture like this. But the same people wouldn't dare mention the ayah in reference to our brothers and sisters of the Shi'a. What kind of dissonance is that? So we need ta'aruf with Christians. We need ta'aruf with Jews. But As-Sayf al-Maslul, Ibn Taymiyyah's book, this is what we have for our brothers of the Shia, for our sisters of the Shia. This is a kind of cognitive dissonance. And I think our community suffers as a result of that. Things are not ever going to be a monolith. How many verses in the Quran? فَاللَّهُ يَحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ فِي مَا كَانُوا يَخْتَلِفُونَ. Allah will be the judge. Allah will be the, that's okay. I have three. Don't take her out. I have three. Alhamdulillah. Allah will be the judge. And so believing that I'm right, as the great Imam Shafi'i said, with the possibility that I may be wrong, and believing that you're wrong with the possibility that you may be right, is what that's the moral calling of a Muslim. Imam Ghazali, he wrote a book called Faisal al-Tafriqa Bayn al-Islam wa Zandaqa. And he said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is ma'asum min al-khat. And I know that the same thing is believed about the Imams, that they're ma'asum min al-khat, ma'asumun. They're divinely protected from error in judgment. He said, if anybody puts anyone else in that seat other than the Prophet ﷺ, then that person is more guilty of the kufr that they're charging the other person with. So I think for me, this suggests that, we can be very passionate about our positions, but we have to exercise some restraint. We have to exercise some acceptance. And if you are blessed, you'll even see wisdom in those differences. That there's wisdom in those differences. If you're blessed, you'll be able to see that.
I think that to see the wisdom in those differences depends on what we already alluded to, this kind of mission-oriented conception of community. That there's something, as you mentioned, Dr. Jackson said, that I'm not going to alienate you, not just for your sake, but for my own sake. So as we come to the final two questions, I was wondering if you can both maybe articulate what some of the shared objectives between the two communities in the United States might be. What do you imagine can be places for mutual benefit, mutual mission, mutual work together, or where we are marching in lockstep towards something. And we, as you mentioned, we are able to also learn from and benefit from each school's tradition, history, particular genius, etc.
Allahu Akbar. You know, if you'd allow me, Bismillah. No, Bismillah. Part of what I'm experiencing here is this is helping me to reconcile my blackness. I'm an African American. I'm a descendant of people that were systematically dehumanized in this country, and people that have had to carve out an existence from the margins for most of their, and currently, existence in this country. And whenever I've seen someone that has forgotten that, it has always been like, how could you allow yourself to forget that? You know, a friend of mine was living in Cairo, and he had done really well for himself, working in, I don't know, tech or something like that. And I went to visit him. He's also African American, and they had a live-in housekeeper. And I came in, and the housekeeper was Sudanese. And I came in, I'm making conversation with the housekeeper. How are you? How's the family? This, how you been? And his son had the audacity to say, Dad, why is he talking to her? And I looked at him, why am I talking to her? Because she is me. My grandparents used to clean people's houses. How can I allow myself to forget? I couldn't. So when I'm thinking about my experience this afternoon and thinking that maybe there are Shi'i Muslims that enter spaces where I'm teaching or I'm working and maybe don't feel welcome or feel marginalized or feel forgotten or feel alienated, I'm almost ashamed to say that I hadn't considered that more deeply. And I think I want to commit myself to considering that because I know what that feels like. Some people I'm seeing here, and I saw them praying Dhuhr, and I'm like, SubhanAllah, where's my brother? I can't see him anymore. Where was he? He comes to my classes. There he is right there. He comes to my class all the time, mashallah, and we have a great rapport. And so now I'm thinking like, man, have I always made him feel welcome? Have I just taken for granted that he was just like this? You know, but to feel that responsibility in the name of brotherhood, fraternity, sorority, sisterhood, right? We're a community. And I think that everybody, and I'm gonna speak to the Sunnis that are present, because in many instances, today being the noted exception, we are the numerical majority. And that places a certain onus, a certain responsibility on our shoulders to make sure that other exponents of Islam are being considered, right? We have a practice, and we don't plan on departing from that practice, as I wouldn't expect you to depart from your practice. But what can we do to accommodate? What can we do to make this a shared space of worship? And so I'd like to just, use this time to say that I'm personally committed to that, and to express that before my, Shi'i brothers and sisters. I'm personally committed to that, and I'm hoping that other, Sunnis present will also be personally committed to that.
It's much harder to go after the Sheikh than before.
Yes,
Again, to like reiterate those points that, Tawheed is an action, right? It's an action. And I feel Sheikh Ubaydallah mentioned this in the opening, that we have to see, when he was quoting Dr. Sherman Jackson, we have to view each other as inescapable and unignorable parts of that mission that we have to achieve, that goal that we have to achieve. To actualize that Tawheed, you open with the ayah. The ayah in just the first sentence emphasizes 3 times the idea that you have to do this collectively. Hold on to the rope of Allah. That's a command to everyone. Then it says jami'an, collectively. That did not need to be added. It was already understood. Everyone has to hold on. If we're all holding on, then we are all holding on. But it was said that hold on collectively. And then it said, do not go into groups. Do not go into. So again, emphasizing that this has to be together. And then together remember the fact that this is something that which is a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, used to be enemies. All of these acts are collective. And I feel like for us, it's very, it's a departure from the Quranic message for me to believe that my Islam has nothing to do with the Islam of others over here. There was a survey I remember a few years ago, and it spoke about Christians leaving Christianity, and a number of them going and no longer being religious, entering atheism or agnosticism. And that troubled me deeply. I was so sad. And I was speaking to some people in the community, and they're like, why are you sad? People are leaving Christianity, you know, like modern day Christianity is this and that. And I says, people are leaving God. They're leaving a path which ultimately reminds them to think of God at least once a week, maybe every day. I was like, for me, that person being a Christian is better than them being an atheist. Not in a moral sense, but I'm happy with where they are. I'm happy with God in their life, and I can think of the potential that God brings to the life of a person. And in the same way, for me, it would hurt me to see someone, a Sunni Muslim, lose their Muslimness. I would not be happy if they left Sunni Islam. Now, unless they became Shia, welcome, ahlan wa sahlan. But again, and I say this genuinely, like, it would not please me in any sense to see a Sunni losing their Sunnism and going towards something which is un-Islamic. Because when they're Muslim, that's a source of pride for me. I think of the Prophet looking on to his Ummah and the numbers of his Ummah. And so back to that point, that we have a shared mission. We have our Islam, our Tawheed, the primary thing that we want to achieve, the cause of our existence, depends. Allah has made it depend on it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to those who believe, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, isbiru was-sabiru wal-rabitu, that be patient and then help one another in patience. It's not enough for you to be patient yourself. This is collective. Actually, it says rabitu. The people that did Rabtu were the people that were looking after the frontiers of the Islamic lands, that go and guard Islam together, be preservers and protective over Islam together. So for me, I think our mission here in America, we have the chance, we do have that baggage, but we can shake some of that off, and we can see that we need one another. We need one another to actualize Tawheed, to bring that lightness that is Tawheed, that Nur, to help people to come from Dhulumat ila Nur. We need each other to do that. It's not achievable. We cannot do it by ourselves. It's not the number. Again, we lose wisdom when we focus on the otherizing. We lose the wisdom. We lose an element of Islam. And when you lose an element of Islam, then you can't invite to pure Tawheed, because there's something missing. So to that Sheikh's point, I do believe, that there's differences. They come about, they're natural. They come because of our condition. And particularly in our time and day, we have to be able to see that the person who is holding a view that they hold is doing so from a place of good faith, right? Vast majority of people do not have a grudge. So yeah, coming to that and once we recognize that, we can do many things. I think the achievements that we can have will come about naturally over here when we can think collectively, when we can get over our differences and realize what priorities look like. The other challenges will be so much easier. Like if we have that unified front, all of the other challenges will be much easier. If I'm no longer investing my energy in polemical videos, I can work with you to figure out what is causing harm to our children in the streets, in the schools. We can work together on that. Not to say that polemical differences are going to disappear. No, we have those differences, but we recognize that those are not obstacles. They're realities, they're there. But in spite of them, we will still and can still and should still work together to get to the priorities of Islam.
Ahsantum. For our final question, we want everybody to leave this space. We have QA after this, but we want everybody to leave this space with a sense of mission and something practical, something that maybe you can offer as advice for something they can go home and do, or maybe not go home, go to another masjid and do, or go to an organization and do. Can you both express maybe one or two points of advice that you would offer in that regard for kind of the lay Muslim, and perhaps offer some reflections and advice specifically to people involved in organizing, community organizing, masajid organizing, leaders and scholars of the community as well, from your vantage point?
Bismillah. I think that everyone here should assume a responsibility of raising the consciousness of other Muslims in the community. And when you hear a biased view, or when you hear something uncharitable to your brothers and sisters from another religious persuasion, you should tell people that's not what we need right now. Some people feel quite warranted in making those kinds of statements because there's historical precedent for those statements. And we can't pretend as though there isn't. But to say to them, that's not what we need right now. That's not what we're doing. We want to amplify those ummatic voices. I'm not saying those things aren't in the tradition, but there are other things in the tradition as well. And, some people forget that with every iteration of tradition, we are making selective amplifications and suppressions, right? Tradition is not just, you don't just take it lock, stock, and barrel. No, you tailor it, you alter the garment so that it fits your context. As my dear brother mentioned, we are living in a time in which faith itself is under attack. The very legitimacy of religious faith is being questioned by Muslim youth. What time do we have for sectarian strife? So I think, putting people on notice that this is what we're doing consciously. See, some people think, oh, it's in a book somewhere, so we have to do this, right? And so I think people that are knowledgeable of the tradition have to make people aware that, yes, there's lots of things written in books, I'm sure, but we're choosing to prioritize voices of unity, voices of love, voices of community, voices of ummatic concern. And if we're wrong in that, then we'll risk that. And so I think, if you hear something, you should say something. If you hear a plan being formulated and members of the Shi'i community aren't even being included, you should say, well, what about reaching out to members of that community? Have you considered, the needs of people in that community? Have you considered the very specific concerns of people within that community? And I think all of us will be better, and our experience of each other will be enriched for it, inshallah.
It's a little embarrassing to share advice with people that are probably much wiser than me and have more experience. But if I could share, I would say that going forward, it's important for us to kind of recognize those priorities. So Sheikh saying that we have these voices in our tradition, and we definitely do, and they're there, they're in the books. We also have these voices that are civilizational voices, voices that think civilizationally, voices that think on that ummatic level, to read those as well, to consider those as well, to not be offended by the idea of charting a different path. Sheikh said that, we could be wrong. The reality is that, there's not been a perfect state of the Ummah at any time. The Ummah self-corrects. We try, we test, we stay within the framework, we stay within those lines. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And the next generation will come and say, hey, hopefully they'll be charitable and they won't say what we do, that, the elders were terrible, like they know what they're doing. They'll come and they'll correct. We can try things. It's worth trying. The potential good that can come out of this is worth trying. It's worth putting our effort into, right? So much can be done. All of you have shown that you believe that it's worth trying. You came here. It's a Sunday afternoon, sorry. You can tell tired I am. It's Sunday afternoon. You could have been at Majalis. There's many other things that are going on today. You could be with your families. Some of you probably are thinking about the Iran game, not me.
Of course you want.
But you decided to be here, right? You decided to be here. You decided to give this a chance. Let's give this a real chance. That's what I would say. Let's give this a real chance. Let's figure out how to do this. And we're going to have hiccups. We're going to have mistakes.
Of course.
But if I can turn around and ask Sheikh Ubaydallah, Sheikh, I'm about to do this. How is it going to be perceived? Is there a way I can word this which may not spark as many sensitivities? I should be willing to do that. I should do that. My messaging, Sheikh, I have a Muharram program coming this year. I'd love you to push it out to your community. Come on. The 6th night. What are the things that I can look after? What can I do to make them feel welcome? Shahr Ramadan, we have beautiful du'as that we read from Sahifa Sajjadiyya, from Imam Sajjad. I think it would be lovely for the Sunni community to also experience that. What can we do to make sure that when you come here, there is minimal obstacles and barriers for you to connect it with that, because the intention is that, I think doing that intentionality, making that change and try, it's worth it, right? Let's not look at past attempts with the lens of they tried and maybe they failed. And so what's the point? Let's look, they tried because they believed it's worth it. They got to a point, and maybe we'll be less or more successful than them. But in every generation and every time there's an opportunity, because it's a requirement of us from the Quran, it's a Quranic injunction for us to come together in this way and to hold on to the path of Allah Ta'ala. If we have the opportunity, Sheikh has come here, your communities are close by. When we go back to wherever we're from, Sayyid Suleiman is, mashallah, doing great work as well. And we have the opportunity, we can try. The momentum is starting to be built. Let's not let that momentum die down. Let's make this a real priority. Let's reshift. Like, it might take some thinking. We might have to sit down and think, what do I do? And what am I doing? And what can I do to actually push this forward, to keep pushing it? It's like that car that breaks down and, people have to get out. Someone's behind the steering wheel and you have to just push until it starts.
Yeah.
And it takes a while and there's bumps, right? But when that engine gets going, that car can start moving again. And sometimes we all have to see ourselves as pushing that car until that engine starts. And then, inshallah, the ride becomes smoother.
MashaAllah. And the real thing that you can do practically is like me and Dr. Moreski, our children, we're raising them together. My son Najashi is right now at her house watching the Iran game. Alhamdulillah.
All right, let's we'll spend another 20 minutes or so fielding some questions. I'll be repeating the question for the sake of the virtual and the recording. We'll start ladies first. Yes.
So I feel like this idea of pushing forward the unity between the Ummah is something that is really important to me. But I feel like I'm from the DMV area, and I'm sure this is a sentiment for a lot of communities around the nation. This conversation in and of itself is very far reality from the community I'm from in the DMV and from other communities across the DMV. So I'm wondering, like, in those situations with those communities where even the mention of the name Sunni, like the Sunni, the Sunni school of thought will like ruffle feathers. What are like preliminary steps that we can even start to like implement? A lot of people think it's not an important issue, like we have bigger fish to fry type of thing. Yeah, like what are some like preliminary steps we can start implementing within our spaces?
So I can just repeat the question for the Zoom audience. So the question is, what are the preliminary steps that an individual can implement in a community that may not be open to like an interfaith kind of dialogue and Ummatic vision?
All of this is going to take education. It's going to take reflection. It's going to take time. We're not going to jump into it. Some communities will go faster towards that, those Ummatic ideals and thinking in that way, and some will be slower and more begrudging. But the education has to be there. I, for one, for example, have decided that, in as humble way as possible, that I'm willing to take the brunt, like in my actions, in my dealings, in my articulation of my beliefs. I will do so in a way which will always feed into, especially if it's public, but wherever I am, to encourage this form, because I am dedicated to trying to make this happen. It can. I'm not certain it will happen. I'm not so certain it's successful, but what I am certain of is that this is desirable. This is desirable. So I'm going to make that effort. Now, if I'm going to make that effort, I also recognize that human beings are human beings. People are different. People have different, upbringings and teachings and training. I'm going to have to look at where I am and figure out how do I do that. So maybe this year I'm just going to have to speak about how, for example, in the Shi'i setting, the Ahl al Bayt function with others. How did the Ahl al Bayt function? What did they do? Now the Shi'i community might be accustomed to hearing the stories of Saqifa. But then what happened beyond Saqifa, for example? Imam Ali was not selected as the caliph. The caliphate was not given to him. But what happened? How did he act? What did he do? Did he retreat? Did he start his own cult and start to work counterintuitively to the Ummah? What did he do? So these things will take time, they'll take training, they'll take reframing. I think a lot of people, because they've lost the ability to imagine the actual Ummah, because there's hurt, there's genuine hurt, people feel disenfranchised. If we can remind them that this is both a value that is passed on from the Ahl al Bayt and give them some hope that it can actually be achieved, they might be willing to do so again. I think there's a lot of that hurt, that bad sort of taste in the mouth, like removing that is part of it. But yeah, we all have to be committed. Like I have to be committed that some people might push back, but I'm going to learn and educate myself to figure out that this is actually something which is a priority in the school of Ahl al Bayt, and I'll push. And I'm not saying this is the only narrative. Other people might come and say, no, we believe that the Ahl al Bayt are. And I'll say, these are my evidences. This is what I believe. This is how I interpret these particular actions, and I'll articulate for them. Some people oppose something because they can't imagine it actually occurring and happening. They can't remember that. They can't imagine the actualization of that. But once it becomes like they think it's a reality, they can get fully behind it. Like, okay, we're talking about sports. Like if you look at England fans, I'm not one of them. Like in the beginning, we're all very like, yeah, England's playing, it's going to be okay. Like, we'll play, it'll do good. Maybe we'll get past the group stages, maybe we won't. But then you pass the group stages and you're like, oh, okay. Oh, nice. Well done, England. And then you get to the quarterfinals. And then all of a sudden the rhetoric changes. Oh, it's coming home. And then you get to the semifinals and everyone's bought in now. Because now winning, and this has been happening for 30, 40, 50 years. We haven't won in decades, right? But we get to the semi-final, it's almost a possibility again. And we're all behind and everyone's cheering and everyone's excited and the naysayers are nowhere to be seen because they can now imagine that it's going to happen. And I think that's where we need to get to. We need to get people to there and then we'll see that people will come behind, that hype will come in itself.
Beautiful. If I could, that's actually a consummate answer. If there were anything that could be added to that, I'm reminded of the work of Ibn Ta'ala as-Sakandari, a Sunni a Muslim scholar. I teach a lot of his books. One of my favorite scholars in the tradition. And he was offering a tafsir, an exegesis of the story in the Quran of Iblis and Adam and Hawa. And he said, very few people think about the spiritual illness that undergirded Iblis's inability to prostrate to Sayyidina Adam. And he said it was insecurity. That somehow Iblis thought that Adam's promotion entailed his demotion. And some people, they're very insecure that if we're talking about promoting unity, won't this mean that our sect or our movement or our tayyar, our trend will receive less? It's almost like, is their gain our loss? And I always say, don't act from insecurity, act from security. So you can appeal even to their enthusiasm for what they're doing. Look, if the playing field is leveled and we have mutual respect for each other, let the best da'wah win. That's what I say. Whatever is best in calling to Allah, let it be what people adhere to. So I have no reservation about platforming Shi'i mashayikh in our spaces. I have no reservation about sharing spaces with Shi'i ulama. And I say to Sunnis, you shouldn't either. You should be more secure than that, right? When you say, no, we can't have this kind of unity, you're acting out of insecurity. And while insecurity is understandable, especially for the minority community, right? The fear is that we might be dissolved in the larger community. I totally understand that. And I would try to identify with that to some degree. But I would also remind that person, and I might be speaking out of turn, referencing the Shi'i community. The Shi'i community has been here for millennia. It's not going anywhere. It's not, you have nothing to fear. This is a strong tradition. This is a robust tradition. This is a tradition supported with scholarship and devotion. Unity is not going to dilute Shi'ism, and unity is not going to dilute Sunnism. If we're blessed by Allah, it can actually make us stronger. I think, and this is just my personal view, I think that this gathering is stronger than, a sect-specific gathering. Because in this space, everybody is comfortable in their Muslimness. I'm already stealing terms from you, right? I'm already stealing terms from you. And to be mutually acknowledged, even by others in your Muslimness, it's affirming. I converted to Islam when I was 16. And I don't mean this as disrespect to anybody. But there was a brother, a very hardcore Salafi. Some people pejoratively call them Wahhabis. But he was a very hardcore Salafi. And he came to me and he said, tell me any group of Muslims other than Ahl al-Sunnah, and I'll tell you why they're going to hell. I almost left Islam. It was so toxic. I was just like, bro, that's like, whoa. Like it felt bad. Like it felt bad. Like, bro, you want to tell me why other Muslims are going to hell? Any group, I'll tell you why they're going to hell. Bro, I didn't accept Islam for that. So I think showing people that in our insecurity, we're actually weaker. And in our confidence and in our security, we're actually stronger as Sunnis and as Shi'is. Okay.
Apologies, I have to head out for other event. I wish this conversation could continue. And barakallah feekum.
No, you grace us with your presence, Sheikh.
Sorry to say true.
Say trouble, so. Assumption. Fernando.
So, like, even, you mentioned, there's some traditional conversation, right? Is this something that we can implement and, like, have a part two solution? Like an ongoing discussion, like Shia Sunni,
Bismillah,
like work.
Bismillah. I mean, I don't make those decisions. I'm just a teacher at Ta'leef, but I think that they would be open to that. But I'll certainly broach the topic. Yeah, I'll certainly broach the topic.
I mentioned Ta'leef because it's like another community of those.
Of course.
Muslim communities. Right?
Alhamdulillah.
Like you said, it's like we're in a time where, Zionists, are
Fernando, see,
going after Muslim people.
that's that action. Fernando, look, let's get past all this talk and let's do it. We need a part two. It's like, okay, mashallah. Alhamdulillah, mashallah.
And I think also just to add that it's important for us to have that dialogue, but also like think of a time where I can come and I can sit with a fellow Sunni or you can sit with a fellow Sunni and you don't have to talk about the Shi'aness and the Sunniness. Like we can talk about parenting as Muslims. We can talk about like social media as Muslims. There's so many topics that we can talk as Muslims and we will probably lean into very similar sources or we will pull from the same kind of ideas and practice. I think sometimes that conversation can just be, it can be very normal for us to just talk about those things which impact all of us, like the upcoming cost of living crisis, right? Or the cost of living crisis, economical things, political things. How are those impacting us? Like, how is this idea when these politicians and senators come and they speak about Sharia law? They're not talking about Sunni Sharia law, Ja'fari fiqh. They're talking about Muslims as a whole.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many conversations we can have just as a single unit. And I really look forward to that day that we can do that. We can come, that we can come and we can have Mawlid events together where we're just speaking about the Prophet. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And I am feeling that euphoria as my Sunni brother speaks of the merits and virtues of the Prophet, and them likewise. Like I look forward to those days that we're always going to have those conversations, and we need to have those conversations, because that is the intellectual growth of our community. But there's also so many other conversations that we can have together, and most people will not be able to tell the difference.
I'll just plug based on bouncing off of what Fernando mentioned. Sister Ali is working on plugging Sacred Roots into an Iman-led project, Inner City Muslim Action Network. So if you want to get involved in that, and we're not talking about polemics, Sunni Shia or anything, we're talking about real issues here in the city. So see her with the kafia hijab here. Inshallah. Sorry to put you on the spot. If you have a question,
Yes, I do.
that'll be the exchange there.
Yeah. Yes, please come talk to me about the Sacred Roots Iman connection. Would love to build that. And my question is actually about that for all three of you. A little bit different from theology, thinking politically and thinking about, you talk about shared vision. And when we think about Muslims who are suffering around the world, be it Sudan, Palestine, Iran, Lebanon, it's often the same aggressors that are injuring both of us, all of us. So I guess I want to hear from you three, like how, in terms of sort of building political momentum and coalitions, what's the best way for us to do that with one another?
We haven't heard from you. Yeah. Moderator.
The question was, how do we best build political coalitions? I mean, from my vantage point, and then I'll pass it off to the better minds. That's in one way, that's what Sacred Roots is all about. It's about creating a space for the hearts of Muslims, regardless of sectarian affiliation, can come together and build trust in one another. You cannot, in my view, you cannot build a robust political movement without a sense of love, trust, care for one another. And so from my vantage point, it's a long, there's a certain type of activism that can be done and should be done now, but for it to carry the day over the long term, over generations, it has to be with the issue of relationship building in mind, and more than coalition building. perhaps marriages in mind. I mean, it's a shared, we're a family, so thinking of family, or the Ummah as a family in that way, I think is a foundational step. I don't think it has to be done first before any, political activism occurs. But it has to be in concert. And by the way, we should also mention, the unity has already been built on the battlefields. Just thinking about the resistance overseas. The sad thing is that those of us in the periphery of the Muslim lands, in the privileged periphery, we're still all, schismatized. But the people under the bombs, the people, with the guns in the hand, protecting Muslim lands, unity is being built there. Is being built there. We need to recognize our positionality vis-a-vis that we should, I think, be a little bit hard on ourselves, that it's taken us so long when we're in relatively privileged position.
Inshallah. No, please.
And it's an extremely important point. And I think just recognizing, like, it sounds cliche, but recognizing the common enemy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leans into this even in the Quran when he says for the Muslims and the people of the book to come to Alu ila kalamatin sawa, like come to a common word. Why? Because the enemy of all of faith is that disbelief. Like you need to strengthen at the very basic level belief against disbelief. For us, our enemy is common. They're not looking as who? That bombing in Minab. It would not matter to those individuals that bombed those girls in Minab, that school, and the young boys that died. Their faith didn't matter to them, right? They saw them all as the same. So I think for us, recognizing that we have that common enemy, but then again, building that strength, finding where that strength comes from. Sheikh mentioned a point earlier about shaitan, like spiritual illness, like much of the obstacles that make it difficult for us to come together are those spiritual illnesses. It's the ignorance, it's the spiritual illnesses, and then we have work to do to get there. Some of it's going to be, we can get people to think about common enemies. We can do that, but how do you get them to then work together? How do you get them to be productive? Because they can see the common enemy, but they can still have arrogance. They can still let the ego get in the way. So it's a multi-pronged approach we're going to have to do. I look at myself, I think of the Feltham Six in the UK, for those who've been following, a group of individuals who have just been charged with terrorist charges for stopping, for going into factories that were building weapons for Israeli systems. They were going in and vandalizing, for example, the factories, or stopping the gates, or not allowing, trucks to go in and out, right? Similar to what was happening in Portland when they weren't letting ships come in. But these people actually went into some of the factories, and they've been now charged after 2 years. They have terrorist charges against them, 6 of them. Yeah. I'm actually embarrassed that I only know the Muslim name in there. I know Fatima. Would I have known anything about them? Would I have cared? Would I have followed the thing if Fatima wasn't in there? That's embarrassing for me, right? So recognizing that there's so many missions that we have to be, like we have common missions, not just with Muslims, with non-Muslims. And then when it comes to the Muslims, like we just can't be successful without one another. And we're all at threat. It's not a threat to a single person. Like you said, look across the board. Look over here. If you want to really dig and follow the money, follow the paper trail, you'll find that a lot of Islamic phobia is coming from the same people that are hurting Muslims abroad. Those that are trying to make your life miserable here, and not just your life, the miserable life of other people, that are exploiting people, is very much connected. But thinking about that, and then again, thinking ourselves as one ummah, like we've lost that idea that we're one body, that if the arm hurts, then the whole body should feel it, the whole body should experience it. We very much, even within Shias and Sunnis, right? A Sunni can look onto Sudan and not feel the level of anger that they would if it was someone in their own family. That's a disease, that's a problem. That's a misunderstanding of the Quranic values.
Allahu Akbar. Bismillah. I think that some of this comes back to almost the misfortune of being such a literate and doctrinaire community. Because even when we think about unity, we think about issues. Let's talk about this, let's talk about that. When real unity has there's a prioritization of the practical. Sometimes I tell people the key to all of this in terms of political organizing is ta'aruf. Can we just get together and eat together? Can we get together and talk about parenting together? Can we talk about the difficulty that we experience just being people of faith in this context together? Can we talk about the professional discrimination that we experience in our workplaces together? Can we talk, and not only that, sometimes it's not all trauma. Can we celebrate our joy together? Can we celebrate your joy, my joy? Can we praise great creativity together? Sometimes I tell people, don't make the Sunni Shi'i divide the title of the event. I mean, we did today, you know. But sometimes I think for like a political organizer, we're just trying to get people together to talk about the things that are impacting their ability to live lives of dignity in this, on the southwest side of Chicago. You should be a part of that conversation. Sunni, Shi'i, Christian, Jewish, agnostic, atheist, but even more for people who are Muslim. Because I know you're inspired by the ideals of faith, you can't afford to miss this conversation. But let there be a more practical basis for our assembly than just theological difference. You know, mashallah, we have friends that, you know, belong to the Shi'i community. And I can honestly say, I don't think we've ever discussed any theological differences over dinner, you coming to our home. We're just arguing about, you know, everything else. You know, so I think that might be that practical, you know, dimension of human relationships. There's something extremely artificial about making doctrine the central point of our engagement at all times. What can be achieved that way? And like Sheikh Trent mentioned, if we were actually fighting, if we were actually resisting, we probably wouldn't be talking about that. Right? We probably, and that's why one Sheikh, he said, if you want to see people united, bring them together for an activity that forces them to work together, like a soccer game or basketball game or bowling or something like that, because they can see past their doctrinal differences and they just see the guy that doesn't pass the ball. Amen. It's not because you're Sunni, bro. It's because you don't pass, man. Pass the ball, kid. You know, like that's healthy when that happens. When you can see this person not as just, you know, a member of a religious community, but a human being that's in front of you. Right. And so I think creating more opportunities for that kind of, you know, real full frontal person to person engagement. We need that in our community.
Thank you so much for this really, really incredible conversation. I want to appreciate how wonderfully you're emulating the etiquette of unity, but also giving us these very intellectual and practical concepts like the Ummatic. I mean, this is incredible. I think I'm gonna sit with this forever. I really appreciated, Sheikh Ubayd, the way you started off talking about healing. And I think that all of us here can experience that at a visceral level. I mean, maybe I really do. I feel the sense of joy, right? And I'm reflecting on what gives us that sense of joy. It's the healing of things that have been severed, you know, and then the sort of the othering that has happened, I think it's a very political project, right? And it creates wounds. And we don't always remember that, you know, how wounded we have become as a result of that. And then we come together in these shared spaces and then we feel it in our bodies, like in ourselves, right? How happy we are. I'm so happy to see Brother Tawseef here, our chaplain from University of Chicago, Brother Audits, and, you know, it's just like being in this space is incredible. So thank you. Thank you for creating this opportunity. And thank you for just talking about it so beautifully and so conceptually. If it's okay, I wanted to just make a little, share a little something about my perspective, looking at this anthropologically. It'll be brief, I promise. But I wanted to appreciate the way that you are talking about solidarity and you're talking about intimacy and friendship rather than tolerance. Because there is a very Western liberal model, right, of diversity, of religious plurality, of diversity that sets the bar deliberately. This is a very political project at the level of tolerance. It's a very free market capitalist model. And I say this to my students when we read Adam Smith in discussions of political economy, I bring their attention to a passage that Adam Smith has where he talks about religious plurality. And he says that we need to have religious plurality because for as long as people are competing, religious communities are competing with one another, then they don't have the collective passion, right, to work against the state. So there is a project of religious diversity and pluralism that seems so innocuous, and we see it all around us, right? The celebration of inclusiveness, even our interfaith. I'm a member of the Interfaith Council in Hyde Park, Kentwood, right? And I bring this up all the time, that we are not talking about solidarity. This isn't really unity. We stop at the level of tolerance. And we need to, and that is based on this idea of competition, right? Samsung and LG, they recognize that they exist within the same market, but they are absolutely in an agonistic relationship with one another. They are competing for profit. And that is the system that this system wants us to have, right? You are competing for your brand, your Shia brand. This larger brand of Sunni has its own brand and its own, right? And at most, we tolerate. We don't want to kill each other. We don't want these companies killing each other. But they're not supposed to be unified, because the moment they unify, then they realize, oh, we have immense amount of power. So at the very beginning, since the late 1700s, at the birth of liberal capitalism, global liberal capitalism, this idea of religious pluralism was about depoliticization. So this model of what you are emulating here is not, we gotta tolerate each other, you know, we have to be respectful of other people's freedoms. That's your choice. This is my choice. This is not the language of liberal choice. This is the language of no. We develop the etiquette, the courage. We make ourselves uncomfortable because building solidarity is really hard. It takes so much work at the level of husband and wife, right? When I think about like the etiquette that you're describing here of not being coercive, the Prophet ﷺ not being coercive, because expanding God's mercy. I can't do that in my own household, you know? Now expanding that to the classroom, to the community, to the masjid, and to interfaith, to including the atheist, the agnostic, the spiritual but not religious, right? It takes so much work. And it's intimacy, solidarity, community, and it is not tolerance of differences.
Allahu Akbar.
So-
Beautifully stated.
Just want to thank you for that.
In fairness,
Sallu ala Nabi.
it's hard to tolerate Ustadh Ubaydallah because his smile pulls you in with a type of gravity into friendship. So it can't just be tolerance. And I think that's the prophetic model. And if we can have a takeaway for everybody, it is to model akhlaqan in terms of your character, a way where you are a gravitational pull toward the other. Not just that your argumentation kind of convinces the other. Forget that for a second. But that you become a gravitational pull because of your character, because of your adab, and your etiquette. I think we have time for maybe one or two. I think everybody's hungry. So Sister Latifa, and then we'll pass it to a brother, and then we'll.
I'm going to be really specific here. And I can jump in. Two specific situations that I keep running into in different forms. As an educator, right? I work at one of the few schools in the DC area that is Sunni Shi'i. That's a part of kind of the philosophy, like this, the masjid associated in their space where people come together. And we have this request for separate Islamic studies class. We never do it, but we have this request.
And then the second space is there's this platform called Teachers Pay Teachers, where teachers put up curriculum they developed and people buy it. And a Muslim one has just been developed. And part of the requirements for posting is that you're under everything has to be aligned with and reviewed by and aligned with the Ahl al Bayt. That's what one of the things. And so, and generally when things like that happen, what she has to do is go make their own. But so in both of these situations, just ask me for advice. Like if we're embracing this frame of we're trying to be united in one ummah, how do we address both of these situations? Right? From an educational point of view, I would understand why people want things separate in Islamic studies. However, there's so much that is the same that people just need to teach those things to their children at home, the separate things. And that's what has been our policy. But people are asking for this. So I'm just wondering if you have any advice in both these situations.
No, والله.
Do you mean advice to the teachers?
Just how to handle both of these situations in the effort to try to keep the unity.
I still remember my religious studies class when I was 9 years old, 10 years old. And
That's traumatic.
religious trauma. No, actually, that one's less relevant. I remember one that when I was 11 years old, and I just entered, we call secondary school, I think. Anyways, and I remember the teacher teaching something, and I flicked through the book, and I saw something, and I was like, oh, he's going to be it's going to be very Sunni, but I remained in the class, so I had no choice. And then I remember learning something in that class. So that teacher of mine had just come back. He'd experienced a tsunami. He was non-Muslim before, but then he'd become a atheist. So he taught us this curriculum on Islam. And he spoke about man as the Khalifa of Allah. The Muslim view on that. And he spoke about our responsibility to the environment and our responsibility that extends to all other places because we're the Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That has shaped me since that day up until now.
SubhanAllah.
I kid you not, I think of Khalifa in that way. When I was 11 years old, I don't say how old I am now, my wife was pointing out some extra gray hairs I have today. That stuck with me and it stayed with me. And it guides even some of the things. And that, again, that person a teacher declared to us on that first day that he'd become atheist, he'd left. He was teaching us a curriculum on Islam, which was majority Sunni. So you can imagine the absurdity for me. But I came away from some lessons from that class, which and so my point here is that it's not the end. If we have to compromise in some places, if that compromise makes sense, our kids are not going to necessarily lose their Shi'ism. We have to sometimes, and we do this when we put our kids into certain environments, or we recognize there's environments that they're in that might not be ideal according to us. We find ways to make up for those whatever's lacking. We add to it, right? Sometimes you might put your kid in a Muslim school and you think the math there isn't great, but the environment is what I really need. So I'm going to have to find a tutor So sometimes it's that kind of situation. If we can get in there, if being there, being part of it, being part of that movement, I'm not sure exactly whether they recognize that Shias are there or not. It's a Shia space, yeah. I'm saying, but the curriculum-wise, sharing the curriculum, I'm not sure how that impacts. Is it all just digital and no one knows what's happening? But in some cases, it's worthwhile. I think we get worried about possible outcomes, which are less dreadful than we originally imagined. And yeah, we may have to fix. I think in that particular situation, though, if it's not possible to abide by that, maybe encouraging the organization to push a form of Sunnism which isn't exclusionary. which is more open. Maybe saying, hey, you guys, where's, for example, because this is a beautiful thing about the Ahl al Bayt, and this is why we kind of thought about centering this event around the Ahl al Bayt, because the Ahl al Bayt allow us to become closer to one another. If I can get them to speak about in that syllabus, keep it. Teach Hanafi or fiqh or whichever fiqh you want to do, teach the Ash'ari or whichever aqidah you want to teach in there and promote, but add something about the Sunni view on Ahl al Bayt. Make it the Sunni view. That itself creates a bridge, makes some comfort for the Shias. It allows in the future for conversations to be had, and it helps. So we can improve the curriculum for them. I think, Shias, we talk about this. We improve our Quran recitations because of Sunni influence, right? We do that. We accept it. We take the good from where we can. I think even for us, so we can improve one another. I see this genuinely in the benefit of yourself, that if you have a version of Sunnism, which is more encompassing, which, for example, talks about maybe you want to put in a historical event. You want to talk about a particular civilization. Let's focus on this. Let's talk about this particular event that impacted, whatever have you. Maybe we should have something about Gaza in there. Like, all of these things can allow for there to be more room for inclusivity and be less exclusive, because we don't always have that control. Within the school, though, I think, yeah, I'm not opposed to having that. And like I'm saying, we think it's doom and gloom. We think like causality is very rigid. That if this happens, then that will happen. Often that's not the case. If it makes more people feel welcome in that space, then we can take that approach and we can figure out ways to. I'm not sure if I understood. I actually now realize that what you might have been asking, but I can't undo all the thing. Yeah, teach that curriculum and then figure out ways, like put in the Ahl al Bayt, put in those kind of things. And I think that will be. We have a majalis, we have those programs. If you're in a smaller space, then you have to think about it differently. In a larger space, it's easier.
Jazakallah khair. وختامه مسك. ختامه مسك. I think there's anything to offer after that, mashallah.
Sure.
To add on or to rather comment on what a couple of people have mentioned in terms of creating unity. From a personal experience, I think one of our largest issues is we have all been raised, regardless of your religious perspective, that the other is very much the other. And so we don't have any normalization. We talk about them as if they are an enemy or as if they're not our own brothers and sisters in Islam. And sometimes all it takes is like one either friendship or relationship that really breaks down that hatred, for lack of a better word, or sectarianism. But speaking from my own experience, introducing the opposite perspective into my family and into my community has completely shattered our formative norms of Sunni and Shia dynamics. And so I think sometimes you mentioned a little bit about sometimes it's just a marriage or a relationship that can really start this domino effect of creating this ummah that we know is what Islam is supposed to be, but it takes a little bit of a catalyst to break down some of the barriers that our older generation has, like our parents and our parents' parents and our elderly in the community who cannot fathom the idea of Islam being one unified unit rather than these smaller sets of different opinions.
Gentlemen, thank you for modeling that in your lives, mashallah. I think we're going to close here. It sounds like this energy for maybe a part 2 at some future date. So with your support, with your du'as, inshallah, hopefully we can continue this, and hopefully it continues in coffee shops and in homes and etc.